I'll try to keep it even tone so the high-pitched squeal doesn't start in the back of the room, which I can always tell from flinching. So my group is the third directorate. You'll hear from the portfolios, the program managers, on Thursday and Friday. And so I'm going to give you kind of a very high-level overview and try to entice you to stay through the entire week. My group is the one that we like to say, if it has structure and rises above the ground, we fund it. And I like to tell people that if it wasn't for my directorate, we would not be the Air Force, we would be the Space Force, which is NASA's job, not ours. So we really are the ones that try to integrate the chemistry, the material science, the physics for propulsion, as well as the aerospace sciences and engineering into a cohesive vision for the Air Force of the future. And so you'll see that in the portfolios. They're quite broad-ranging, they're quite forward-looking, at the same time being aware that the Air Force has challenges with our current systems that we're always mindful of, that we try to improve if we can. Sometimes you can't. But hopefully, from the lessons we've learned from today's systems, we won't continue to replicate the same problems with future systems for the Air Force. Our portfolio is divided into 12 portfolios, which were led by program managers. You will hear from 11 of those later this week. We have about 600 grants and contracts between the 12 of us. And so I'd just like to say that to our academic community who's listening out in the internet world, sometimes you send us emails and phone us, and it takes a few days, weeks, for us to get back to you. It's not because we're blowing you off. It's simply because there's 10,000 of you and 11 of us. So a lot of times your email simply falls to the bottom of a very long queue. Resend. And if you still can't reach us, you feel free to contact Dr. Russell or Dr. Hussey, and they will find us. So, but yes, we do value the inputs from our academic and industry colleagues, and we are trying to be respectful and responsive. So the first thing I'll do is sort of tell you a little bit about how we spend the money. The money, as Dr. Russell mentioned in his first slide, is about 160 million, not 120 million. His slides are correct, but the numbers and scale are about right. So we do find work in-house, our intramural activities within the TDs, and I'll give some highlights of those because it's an important component of our portfolio. We also have projects with industry, both in our core program as well as our small business program called STTR. The three areas, as you can see here, aerostructures, interactions, and control, energy, power, and propulsion, and complex materials and structures really are almost placekeepers because the science that's done within these portfolios is really quite multidisciplinary, and you'll see that even in my overview slides, but most definitely in the program managers' portfolios. We do a lot of cross-directorate collaboration, but we also do a lot of intra-directorate collaboration. In very rare cases do program managers work solely in their own discipline all by themselves. And I think that's a strength of AFOSR. We're small enough to be truly multidisciplinary, very collaborative, even in-house. So the aerostructures, interactions, and control, I'm not going to read this because the slides are available to you afterwards, but I just wanted to highlight that there's a motivation for each of these three focus areas. But the key is that we don't do this alone. AFOSR program managers have a very keen eye for developing strategic partnerships, in some cases very long-lasting partnerships, in some cases because they recognize that the Air Force is the lead and no one else is going to do it. So we galvanize the community and really lay the path forward. An example of that is the Hypersonics Foundational Research Plan led by John Schmischer, and he will give you a little bit of an overview of that later in the week. But the highlight that I wanted to mention is that some of the world's best researchers are in the Air Force Research Lab. This is Dr. Gordnier at the Air Vehicles Directorate looking at high-fidelity modeling simulation capabilities for micro air vehicles. This is for flexible structures. This is a PI in Doug Smith's portfolio, and so he'll talk a little bit more about that. So we're always looking for new talent. We're always trying to grow talent. Our lab colleagues do a great job in helping to mentor and maybe guide some of the community into the areas that are unique to the Air Force, as well as reviewing proposals for free, which is good. So the second area, energy, power, and propulsion. This is one of the oldest focus areas or combinations of portfolios at AFOSR. The combustion portfolio has actually, I think, been around for 59 years of our 60 years. We are very active in the Interagency Combustion Working Group, MACOR. There's a very large community looking at alt fuels. It's a very well-known, long-standing community, and we have a dominant role to play within that community. But because it is such an old, I shouldn't say old, because it's such a well-established community, sometimes it's hard to encourage some of the new professors and academics to get involved. And so I'd like to highlight, this is a PI in Charles Lee's portfolio. It's a Presidential Career Awardee. These are highly prestigious awards. It's $200K a year for 5 years. And highly competitive, highly sought after awards. This particular PI is looking at ion conducting membranes. These are block copolymers embedded with salts, to really try to look at some of the challenges that the Air Force has with lithium-ion batteries. We need flexible, extreme environment tolerance or resilience to our operational environment. Low cost and flexible is always a good thing. So part of our goal is to look out to the community to find the best talent, bring them in, almost market or sell ourselves to them, tell them what our challenges are, and get them to work on our problems. Complex materials and structures is the foundation for all engineering sciences, really. I'm a material science kind of by conversion. I'm an inorganic chemist by training. But at the heart of all of our technologies, there's a material. Coming up with new materials, more complex materials, understanding how they degrade or not degrade in our operational environment is critical. The NSF collaborative project that we have with origami is a great example of how we don't do things alone. It's not to our advantage to. So we have an agreement with NSF, this is with our engineering colleagues over there, that we collaboratively fund. This is $1.5 million a year. We solicit proposals, jointly review proposals, and it's a great opportunity for us to tap into researchers who don't know we exist, because we are very small in comparison to the National Science Foundation. So the highlight I thought was kind of interesting. This is some work that's also being done in our research lab by Benji Moriyami, who's an experimentalist. He's currently on sabbatical for the lab people out there in France, paid for by AFOSR, recharging himself. But he experimentally validated some work of one of his colleagues at Rice University that does show that theory had indicated that the chirality of the nanotube is what's controlling the growth rate. He's experimentally confirmed that. It was just published in the last 2 months. So it's, I think, a nice way of showing that our lab colleagues work very closely with our university PIs to really push the envelope of science. So I'm real big on touting how great the program managers are in RSA because they're actually the ones who do all the work. I just take credit. So we've had a lot of accomplishments for 2011. This is just the ones that I could fit on the slide. But we've had 2 large initiatives that were awarded this year. Materials and Processes Far from Equilibrium and Transformational Computing. And you can see the program managers' names there. But again, it shows you that program managers do collaborate from their disciplines to fund these very large initiatives. And by the way, they create these initiatives. Hypersonics, this was a Jason study that this past summer, John Schmischer was invited to brief what is the state of the art in basic science, because he is the United States premier expert in basic science to enable hypersonics. He's also our newest AIAA fellow, just announced recently, and John would never tell you, so I tell everybody for him. But it's quite an honor for AFOSR to have such a young program manager be a fellow of such a prestigious society. The NSF collaborative agreement on the origami initiative, I've mentioned it, but this is a great example of where 2 program managers got together and pitched a program to Dr. Russell and Dr. Hussey that was selected, and then we went out and built a collaboration with NSF to leverage even more funding. Energy Horizons, which you haven't heard as much about as Tech Horizons, but I promise you, you will, because energy is the future. Without it, you can't do anything. But Energy Horizons was really a fast turnaround. Dr. Mayberry actually last spring review turned to me and said, I think we're going to be asked by the chief to do a study analogous to Tech Horizons on energy, and would you be willing to help? And I said, only if I can get my program manager colleagues involved. So Leslie actually did a phenomenal job of pulling everyone together and doing a wonderful data dump for me. but also the other program managers in my group, as well as the rest of AFOSR, worked all year long to basically provide the science and technical content that I think made the 6-1 component of Energy Horizons so strong. And so,
it was great.
Thank you.
You might repeat that.
Dr. Mayberry said it was great. So everybody who's RSA, yay! But it's just a great group to work with. Also at the same time, Mr. Shabika, who's our lab director, our big boss, actually commissioned an AFRL Energy S&T plan, which again, because we had this great synergy between the program managers here at OSR, we're able to support AFRL's Energy S&T plan, which is complementary to Energy Horizons. So no kidding aside, you will see more about Energy Horizons. It's a very forward-thinking document, more so than Tech Horizons, and it crosses all of the scientific disciplines, not just the ones in RSA. And so the final thing I'll mention is the Materials Genome Initiative. If you're not in the materials world, you may have missed this. It's big news in our community, but it's an OSTP initiative analogous to the Nanotechnology Initiative without the money. It's a new world in science. You do things without money nowadays. But this is really to try to revitalize material science and engineering within this country, which is kind of stagnated because it's a really hard challenge, and people sometimes get daunted by how difficult it is once you try to start doing predictive materials properties. So I think having top cover from OSTP is really going to energize this. And so if you go to any of the Materials Society websites, you'll see a MGI initiative. AFRL has a very large one. The DoD is working collaboratively with NSF and DoD on this, or DOE. So you're going to see a lot more of MGI. Our contacts in my group are Ali Sayer and Joycelyn Harrison. They know everything. I just steal their slides. So I point you to them for money. So we've had a fair amount of changes this year. Chip-Ping Lee is the new program manager for energy conversion and combustion sciences. He comes to us from Aerojet. Mike Kendra is the new program manager for test and evaluation. You will not hear from his portfolio this year. Mike Berman is on sabbatical, but due to come back to us in March, end of March. And like Dr. Russell said, this is an opportunity for AFRL scientists, OSR program managers, to go on sabbatical to get refreshed. Luckily, we were able to recruit Jeff Orutsky from the Naval Research Lab to backfill Mike. And so after he leaves, I'll find out how bad it was to work for OSR. But Laura Cooney is our new program manager for the AFOSR's MURI program. We coordinate all the MURI activities here internally. Kumar Jada, who we borrowed from the lab, is now back at the lab, leading their corrosion study. And Kevin Pohl, who was an assistant program manager in our group, is now working on his master's degree at AFIT. So a lot of changes this year. And I'll end on this slide because I think it's probably what's at the heart of all of AFOSR program managers' job jar, but I think it's really important to recognize that all the program managers at AFOSR are leaders in their own communities. They're extremely proactive. We don't sit in our offices and just wait for proposals to come in. We harvest proposals from the best PIs. We are leaders in the DoD community. A lot of people in the non-basic science community come to us to look for the new areas and to help guide future strategic directions. We are strong advocates for S&T across the entire Air Force, but in particular for science, basic science. And we are mentors for all of the future researchers. So for every conference I go to, I have working lunches with grad students. I can't tell you how many resumes I've proofread, but it's an incredibly important role that AFOSR plays to our younger colleagues, is that to try to expose them to what the DoD scientific challenges are, the Air Force in particular challenges are, and encourage them to work on the really hard problems for the rest of their career, not just while we fund them. So with that, I will take questions. Yes, do you have a microphone? Yeah.
His mic doesn't go out on the web. You gotta
Okay.
Your directorate's area really has a lot of influence in terms of impact on, shall we say, innovation and industry. So to what extent are there activities where, or are you keeping track of what you're supporting is moving into the economic industrial area? I'm talking about materials or the Materials Genome Initiative, et cetera.
Good question. So the question is because our group is so closely tied to innovation, we're sort of at the pointy end of the spear and actually getting value out of some of the science we fund, not just in the DoD enterprise, but in the larger industrial enterprise. And so MGI, the Materials Genomic Initiative, is a little too soon to say because it's really only been alive for a year and so we're not tracking. But to give you an example of one concrete project, we have a hypersonics, a Materials Instructors Hypersonics Center. It's a collaboratively funded effort between NASA and AFOSR. It's $2 million a year for 5 years. That project is actually awarded to Teledyne. Formerly Rockwell Scientific. It's got about 6 universities that work with it. The students go and work in the industrial labs. But it's a way of trying to take something that's been kind of historically challenging to get industry to buy off on some of these new materials, to actually embed them into the science projects early. Get the students in the industrial enterprise, and they are actually what transitions for us.